What's up, gang? Andrew Cooper here. This is Quick Out Fantasy Football, and I'm sure you've noticed by now, no Johnny Impemba here. John Impemba taking some time, our sweet Johnny, to do some fantasy baseball stuff, do some basketball stuff. So I took the initiative to do a little dynasty talk because Johnny doesn't like the dynasty. He doesn't really play it. So I'm bringing on my friends to take over the show today. Dave Kluge of Football Guys. Dave, what's up, brother?
Not too much. Thanks for having me. What a downgrade going from Johnny to me. I apologize to the listeners.
Well, you're gonna have to tough it out, man. You're gonna have to step it up with no Johnny here. So yeah,
This is
no, but yeah,
dynasty season, though, man. This is what I
it
love
is.
talking about this time of year. This is, I feel like, the most crucial point of the season because everybody has their blinders on from the previous year. There's so much recency bias to take advantage of. This is when I'm just firing off trades nonstop.
The best, dude. Right? Like, here's the time where you can do so much speculating about free agency. There's so much
Mhm.
leverage. You know, this truly is honestly my favorite part of the year because and I can see why you would be the same way because we love speculating. We love the deep nuance and all that. So you don't really get that with the base level fantasy
Yep.
football, right? This
I
is
forget
the
where I
deep
said this.
stuff.
Just a few days ago, I said that. I was like, this is my favorite time of the year. And they're like, what do you mean? Like, football ended. And I'm like, this is the best time of year.
People are so weird about it, dude. It is, but you know what? You and I both Reddit guys to some degree, hanging out over there, and immediately the attitudes over there shift where you see people being like, "Oh, the season's over." Like they don't care about playoffs, dude. Playoffs. It's all about fantasy football, and that's where it is here. So thank you guys for hanging out in the chat. We see Jack. We got any Coop here. She's liking your voice. That's my aunt, dude. Big Rams fan. So just for the record, if she's in the chat, you have to say nice things about the Rams. You have to say nice things about Jared Goff. You think you can handle that?
I can do it. We're going to talk some Kyron Williams and Puka Nacua because I got nothing but good things to say about those
Yeah,
two.
we can talk about whatever you want. Here's what I want it to be for the show for the off season. What we're gonna do is we're gonna come on every Wednesday, do quick outs. We're gonna talk about the news that affects Dynasty. So we're not really gonna, you know what? We have plenty of shows where we talk about the playoffs, where we talk about the Chiefs and Taylor Swift and all that. On this show, we're gonna talk about the news that affects Dynasty. Then the second segment, I want to know about your process a little bit because we got a lot of sharp gamers in here. So they don't necessarily always just want to know, oh, I like this guy, I don't like that guy. We're going to get to that too, but we want to hear what you do to help you kind of get an advantage. So we'll get to that. Then I'll give you some debates, some very close guys. And honestly, I picked a lot of these guys based on issues I'm having with my rankings. So I'm going to let you settle that. Yeah, I know, one tight end versus one tight end, one wide receiver versus one wide receiver. And then if we have time at the end, we'll pull up a recent dynasty mock draft and kind of do a little mock the mock. Does that sound good to you, Chloe?
Sounds good, man. Looking forward to it.
All right, man. I want to bounce some notes off you from the news then, real quick. Things that could affect Dynasty and you being a Bears fan. First things first, Shane Waldron. He's been announced as the offensive coordinator as the Bears. Kind of a big name, an interesting name in this space as of late. So, what do you think with Shane Waldron as a Bears fan?
I think it's a great hire. I think Shane Waldron was probably the best offensive coordinator available. I'm
Yes.
surprised he didn't get more head coaching interviews. I thought that he had kind of earned that right after what he did in Seattle. But I kind of joked around yesterday on Twitter. I don't know if you saw this or not, Coop, that it's kind of a Rorschach test among Bears fans. I feel like Bears fans
Let me
see
see.
what they want to see. I'm seeing some people just like, oh, they brought in Shane Waldron. That means Justin Fields is coming back. And then I see another half of Bears Twitter saying, well, this means they're drafting Caleb Williams. And I don't really know how you can look at this signing, this hiring, and see that it means Justin Fields is coming back. Shane Waldron
Right.
kind of had his picking of just about any OC job that he wanted. And it's a tough sell to say, hey, come here and teach Justin Fields his third offense in 4 years on the last year of his rookie contract. It's a much easier sell to say, hey, you want to come here and coach Caleb Williams for the next 4 or 5 years.
Exactly. And I've been kind of looking through to see if I can find any quotes that indicate one way or another. I don't know where people because
Nope.
I've been seeing it too, right?
Yeah.
The two sides saying different things, man. Like obviously if they brought in Cliff Kingsbury, then that means Caleb Williams
Right.
immediately, right? So I mean, like I think some people are jumping off that, but I'm with you, man. It doesn't give us any information one way or another. Do you think there's any world where they draft Caleb Williams and don't immediately let go of Justin Fields and kind of let him hash it out? Is that a real possibility?
So I think it makes sense, and I was actually on with Cecil Lammy yesterday. We were on WFAN on the Fan talking over the radio, and he said that he's hearing from a lot of his sources around the league that that's what they plan to do.
Ooh, spicy.
I think that makes a lot of sense if you look at the data. Like, you don't want to sell low on a guy like Justin Fields who has shown promise. You also don't want to trade out of 101 for a potentially generational type of player like Caleb Williams, but there's more than just added numbers that go into it. There's an emotional aspect to this. And we've already heard a lot of the team leaders in Chicago, DJ Moore, Jaylen Johnson, these big names in the locker room are rallying behind Justin Fields. So then you run the risk of splitting the locker room where you got,
Right.
Justin Fields supporters over here and Caleb Williams supporters over here.
Uh,
But also, like, maybe Caleb Williams isn't going to be ready week one. And you can kind of ease him in with a guy like Justin Fields who knows the team. And then, best case scenario, if they aren't getting what they want on the trade market near the draft, then they wait until October. Wait till the trade deadline when a team's desperate. And then maybe you get a first round pick for Justin Fields.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, dude, quarterbacks they're so coddled compared to other
Mhm.
positions. Yeah, we don't do this at any other position.
No.
At quarterback, it's like, oh, we have to find a nice home for JP Rosen. We need to find a nice place for this guy to go. We need Trey Lance to find a nice landing spot. If this were defensive ends who go first overall or second overall all the time, it's like in Batman where he breaks the pool stick and he's like, okay, this one spot here. You know what I mean? Like, why every other position you have to? They have kickers in there kicking, back to back to back, and they say you're cut because you hit 5 and he hit 4, right? But at quarterback, we have to treat them like it's a totally different world. No, it's okay to have competition. I love to see that, man. So that is what I want to see. Well, actually, technically, as a Patriots fan, I want to see you guys draft somebody completely different and let one of Caleb Williams or Jake May fall to us. Real quick on that front, do you have a take on who goes if they take Caleb Williams? Who goes second? Whether it's Daniels or Drake May, or as a Patriots fan, I'm just trying to say like whoever we get, I love them.
So did you see the study that I did recently about number 1 overall picks, quarterbacks drafted at number 1 overall, and then quarterbacks drafted at 2 through 5 and 2 through 10? This actually really surprised me because I thought, like the Patriots were in a great position sitting at 3, just you don't have to make the decision.
Right.
Take whoever falls into your lap. That always seems like the smart thing to do. But when I actually looked at the numbers,
It's
it's
bad.
not even close.
It's
Like,
bad,
it is,
dude.
yeah. Like,
It's
I
bad.
so I kinda looked at some different thresholds, 4,000 yards passing in a season, 30 touchdowns in a season, winning a playoff game, 5+ years as a starter, going to a Pro Bowl, all these sorts of things. A guy drafted number 1 overall is almost 3 times more likely to hit all of those thresholds than a guy drafted anywhere else inside the top 10. And, like, we remember the Patrick Mahomes, and we remember the Josh Allen, and we remember the Tim Couches and the Jamarcus
Right.
Russells and the big bust, but at the end of the day, those guys that typically go at the top of the first round, if you're not QB1 in your class, the likelihood of being a franchise player is so, so,
It's
so
true.
thin. I mean, literally, the difference from like a guy drafted 5th overall is almost no difference than a guy drafted 25th overall. Once you get outside of the number 1 overall pick, it is pretty flat across the first round.
It's crazy. And the thing is with the recency bias, everyone's going to be like, oh, CJ
Stroud and
Stroud or
Young.
Rex Young, you should still have drafted Young ahead. Because, I mean, most times it's more like the guy that goes 1 is Peyton Manning, the guy that goes 2 is Ryan Leaf. And once you get outside of the first round, and especially the second round, it gets real bad. I was looking at it the other day. The best third round quarterback drafted in 40 years statistically is Russell Wilson. The second best, Matt Schaub. Right.
Oh,
Yeah. I mean, you can, it's like an argument can be made for Chris Chandler to be second, but it doesn't
yeah.
matter. It doesn't matter, right? Like it doesn't. So yeah, it is pretty crazy there. Other news here, Brian Johnson out as OC. And I'm just going to throw some news at you here and you just grab whatever jumps out at you. So Brian Johnson out as offensive coordinator in Philly. Tom Telesco, formerly of the Chargers, now named the Raiders GM. Bengals, offensive coordinator Brian Callahan set to be the Titans' new offensive coordinator. Joe Barry out as defensive coordinator of Green Bay. Anything there that you look at and for fantasy football purposes, you're like, all right.
I think we talked Brian Johnson out of Philly because we saw a pretty significant fall off in Jalen Hurts' production this year. And yeah, I think that's going to be one of the hottest topics this offseason. I mean, Jalen Hurts was like the hot topic 2 off seasons
Right.
ago, and then he kind of shushed the haters, and now here they are bubbling back up again.
They're back.
And They're back, yeah, and honestly, I'm not a Jalen Hurts hater by any means, but I think we maybe did get a little over our skis last offseason, saying, he's in the Josh Allen, the Patrick Mahomes tier. I don't know if he really deserves to be up there. And we saw what he looked like without Shane Steichen. He was also dealing with an injury, so we can chalk some of it up to that as well. But now we're looking at the potential retirement of Jason Kelsey, which really hurts their ability with a tush push that gives him so much of his fantasy value. So I think there's a lot to unpack here. I mean, obviously, Brian Johnson wasn't the best play caller. It was pretty predictable. But then we also hear from the other side of the ball, we've got defenders like Nick Bosa coming out and saying, we put out the blueprint on how to stop Jalen Hurts. Other teams are going to follow it. And from that game onward, everybody kind of did the same thing. They took those rushing lanes out of the middle, and Jalen Hurts was not the same guy we saw over the last couple of seasons.
That happens, man. I remember that happened with Jared Goff and the Rams, where remember Jared Goff was getting the play calls in his ear. So teams started switching up the defenses right before the snap. And then, that kind of was the downfall there. Sorry, Coop. I knew I said we weren't going to talk trash about Jared Goff. We lasted about 5 minutes. We were all rooting for Jared Goff on it, Coop. So don't worry about that. But yeah, I mean, it is very interesting. And I will say, the funny thing about, you mentioned that Jalen Hurts, everyone was down on him, then they were up. They was circulating the picture of all three of Mac Jones, Jalen Hurts, and Tua in the locker room a couple of years ago, and everyone's like, "Look at this!" And now someone just sent me that picture, and I was like, "Man, the thoughts about that picture have changed pretty drastically, have they not?" Yeah. Last one of as far as actual news that's in place: Zach Ertz to the Lions. Do we care? Do we bet anytime touchdown? Doesn't matter.
Kind of weird. I mean, it's always weird to me when you see these like 2 games before the Super Bowl, you're just bringing in a veteran, like a talented veteran at that. I don't know. I mean, like if this happened like in the offseason, I'd say like, oh, this is cool. Maybe somebody that can like mentor Sam LaPorta and take him to the next level or something. But is he even going to be up to speed playing in this game?
No, I think what's going on here is
Ray got hurt.
Right. That's it. Sam LaPorta has the knee that he's kind of been dealing with, right? And they're just saying, okay, if something happens here, he's such an important part of our offense. We have to have somebody hanging out here. So I think that's what it is. I mean, I don't think he's going to play much. So rumors real quick before we get to the next topic here. John Harbaugh seems close to being the Chargers hire. I was hearing that they're at the salary stage, Kluge. So which means that they've actually already said, let's do it. And it's a matter of money. I'm hearing Belichick losing momentum to the Falcons. Arthur Smith apparently back on the block, which is kind of a nightmare. And then Alvin Kamara could be a cap casualty, but I mean that one speaks for itself. But as far as Harbaugh to Chargers, Belichick, Arthur Smith, what do you think, man? Anything? I mean, Harbaugh, I'll tell you this, I love Jim Harbaugh, man. Like,
oh yeah,
just the quotes. Oh, it's so good. It's so good.
Yeah, and I think, that's one way to lure a guy out of a cushy college job is, hey, you get to come out here and fix Justin Herbert, who's shown a ton of potential. So I get it. I understand why he'd want to go there. I think the one that doesn't surprise me all that much is Bill Belichick. I never really understood the Bill Belichick steam to Atlanta. Guy's going to be 72 years old. Like, what are you doing if you bring in Bill Belichick? Like, getting maybe 2 or 3 years. I think it's pretty obvious that what Bill Belichick wants is the all-time coaching record, which is 2 mediocre seasons away from getting it. And like, who wants to bring? I don't know.
He's chasing Shula. He's chasing Shula. I think my opinion on Belichick of what teams could use him the most would be teams that need a separation between ownership and the operations, right? Because he can block that all out and he can prevent that. So like if you're a team like the Panthers with Dave Tepper or Irsay or Jerry Jones or Dean Spanos, or actually a lot of teams have ownership that I think need to shut up, right? And not be standing at field level. Those teams, for culture purposes, I think could help having Belichick. But like, if you're bringing Belichick in, I think you have to have a plan, like a Tom Coughlin plan, where he's going to like become like the president of operations or some other non-hands-on
like Pete
role.
Carroll, same thing, coach and then go into an executive type of role.
Yes, exactly that.
Real quickly, the Arthur Smith thing, are we going to be justified if and when we panic when he signs with the team? Like, let's say Ben Johnson leaves for a head coaching gig and Arthur Smith goes to Detroit. Are we panicking for Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam LaPorta, and Jameer Gibbs?
No,
like, are we going to see Josh Reynolds be a featured part of the offense and Craig Reynolds get like, what happens if he goes to a team like that?
Well, that's why I think depending on the team, I would worry. Like if Arthur Smith went to your Bears and it's another situation where you have one wide receiver, because who do you guys even have after DJ Moore, like Tyler Scott,
DJ Moore, and whoever they drafted 9.
Velus Jones. Yeah, I mean, like seriously though. But that's what happened with the Falcons is that he crafted this offense that was all fullback and clunky tight ends and one wide receiver, and no team was doing that except them, and it didn't work. So if he goes to a team that has stuff in place, I'm not going to worry too much about it. But I really don't want to see that brand of football anymore. It's just so it's gross and it's bad for fantasy and therefore bad for
it's kind of fun, but yeah, it's bad for fantasy.
Right. It's I do
like Jonnu Smith is fun.
Right. Yeah. I do like seeing teams do unique things, but unique in ways that are good for fantasy, not unique and boring and whatever. But anyway, that's it for news. Let's get into this this next topic here. This is what I really wanted to have guys like you on because you're kind of an open book, man. Like you tweet how you feel, what you want to say, and you're willing to share your process and you're willing to share your mistakes, which is great. So that's why I always gravitate towards guys like you where I can say, so like, this is kind of, where I want to go is have you kind of spell out what your process is. First thing I want to ask you is what's your calendar like for the year? Because I know it's very different from one person to the next. Like if you ask a Devy guy, like I know Devy guys
they're in the weeds right now.
They don't even watch. I know some Devy guys that don't even watch like NFL football. They just like all they care about is being first, right? And doing all the other stuff. And then their Devy teams, they're like, oh yeah, if it pays off, then it does. But like, what's your schedule like now? Like, do you get deep into free agency at all, or do you kind of go right into dynasty? Like, where's your head at?
So, full disclosure, I'm pretty much coasting this time of year. This is the time of year after the regular season ends until the end of the Super Bowl. I just want to enjoy football as a fan. I love football. I want to watch the playoffs as a fan. I'm betting stupid 8-leg parlays every single weekend, and I'm not trying to get deep in the weeds and all that. This is the time of year where I want to be a fan of the game. I'm going back to Chicago, my hometown, for the Super Bowl. Family's throwing a big Super Bowl party, so I'll get to see some friends and family and hang out and do all that sort of stuff. As soon as the Super Bowl ends, that's when I get hard back into work. And that's when I start my rookie processing and all that. And that's a mix for me between film and analytics. So I can talk pretty surface level on the rookies right now, but I'll really dive in deep after the Super Bowl. This time of year, though, I do like to take a breather. Coop, you can attest to it. It's tough in the regular season. I'm doing 5 shows a week now in the regular season, writing 2 articles a week on top of that. I've got to do my rankings. There's so much happening in the season, and it's such a grind that I do like to take a little bit of a breather when the regular season ends. But then we get into the rookie stuff, and then I'll also do some free agency trackers and whatnot. But this time of year, like I said, we do 5 episodes a week in season. I'm only doing 1 episode a week right now. After the draft, we'll ramp up to 2 episodes a week. When rookie camps start, we get to 3 episodes a week. And then by August, we're doing 5 episodes a week again. But I think it's important to kind of pull back a little bit right now. So keeping my dynasty rankings fresh, waiting to get into rookies. And then we take a look at free agency when all that starts to roll out.
Yeah, I try to do it that way, but it's behind the scenes. I'm still kind of like tinkering with stuff. Like I have a bunch of articles ready to be posted that I just kind of was like, I might as well get a head start on this. But I'm with you. You got to take a little time. I've definitely been enjoying time with my daughter, especially during these couple of weeks here. People don't realize. It's funny that that's how it works for us. Like they don't realize that our downtime is the playoffs because there's no fantasy. Because once the calendar, the way it dictates, like. There's less than 30 days from the Super Bowl until the legal tampering period. That's that day. Deals are announced, and we're back on the clock, man. Like Howard Bender, who does multiple sports, or John and Pemba, especially for this show, who does basketball and all this stuff. He has 2 days off. We joke the day before and after the MLB All-Star break, where those are like the 2 days there's no sports, right? Like it is crazy. So you got to take advantage of it when you can.
I say this is my downtime, but here I am on a show with you today.
I
recorded an episode on Monday, and I was up in Denver doing a radio show yesterday, and I was doing WGN Sunday night. Like I'm doing something every single day, but it's still even doing, an hour or 2 of content a day is very different than what I'm doing in season.
In season, right? Like in season on Tuesdays, I get up at 8 in the morning and I work until midnight because the rankings got to be out. There's no pushing back the waivers. Right during the season, if you think your deadlines at work are hard and solid, try having your deadline be the kickoff of an NFL game because there's no reaching out to them being like, hey, can you just push this
can we
back?
push back? Yeah.
Can we
Can
push
we push
back?
back these 9 games,
Can we,
please?
can we push Thursday Night Football back a little bit? Like, no. The deadlines are set in stone in advance for us. So let me ask you, this you can go anywhere you want with this question, open-ended type question, but in Dynasty, right? Like everybody has their own things that they do. They have their own processes. Like for instance, you and I are not real big Devy guys, so we kind of wait for all the pieces of the puzzle to be in, right? Like you can watch film now, but you don't have the combine. You don't have even the draft capital and the draft narrative and stuff,
That
right?
helps.
But like
Yeah.
it's super important. None of
Drake
my
May
drafts
or
are.
Jaden Daniels. Let's see where they go, and then I'll let you know who I want better. Yeah,
Dude, people hate when you say that.
I don't
People
care.
hate that. They hate it, right? I don't care either. Yeah. But they hate it because there's so many people out there that put in so much work before the draft that they hate the idea that draft capital does matter, but it does matter. So everyone is going to.
Landing spots matter, draft capital matters. Turns out these guys getting paid millions of dollars as NFL scouts and GMs are pretty good at their job, and I'll let them do some of the work for me.
Exactly, dude. Exactly. So, but anyway, as far as getting an advantage, what's something that you feel either historically or just in general helps you get an advantage or just get in the right mindset? And this can be anything from like type of players you target, trade angles you take, scouting tips, stats you look at. Like what's a little something you can give to our listeners where they say, oh, you know what? That actually makes sense. I'm going to keep an eye on that.
I try to look at the leaders in fantasy points and see the guys who probably don't belong to be atop those leaderboards, and those are the guys that I'm trying to trade. And people are going to see, wow, this guy finished as wide receiver 8. I want him on my team, but try to look outside of just the finish alone and see where you can kind of pivot off of that. I think Nico Collins is a great example. I love Nico Collins, absolutely love him. I've been telling my listeners and my followers to go out and get Nico Collins for years, but what he did this year, I think that's kind of his peak. I don't think Nico Collins is going to be able to replicate year after year what we saw this season. So that's a guy where I'm trying to trade down from Nico Collins, get a guy who I believe to be a safer asset. And if I can add a pick or more assets on top of that, I'm trying to do that. Another thing I try to do right now is buy injured players because we have goldfish brains. We see what we saw a month ago, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, and can't really see beyond that. Last year, as soon as the season ended, I was buying as much Breece Hall as I could in every single league and paid off pretty well. This year, I'm trying to go after J.K. Dobbins and Cam Akers, and there's risk there. Maybe these guys can't bounce back from their injuries. Maybe they do, but either way, I'm buying them and willing to acquire them for pennies on the dollar.
Yeah, bingo. I mean, it's worked so many times, man. Especially the moment I see people on Twitter start saying like, "Oh, he's burned me before, never again." Then all of a sudden, I'm like, "Yeah, I'm in," because we got that great years from Dalvin Cook, great years from Joe Mixon. Because people, "Oh, he burned me before." That's the dumbest take, dude. Like every year is a new year. Evaluate it new and fresh each year. And what you're talking about is so hard to do in theory. The idea of like, oh man, my guy had a great year. I got to give him to somebody else. Right. But it makes all the sense in the world if and a lot of time, this is very difficult because it is a gut feel thing. But you can feel it. I feel it all the time with my players. I look at them and I'm like, man, Evan Ingram is my boy. He had 19 more catches than any other tight end this year. And I'm like,
gotta move off of him.
I know, man.
I was doing that with Deebo Samuel 2 years ago.
I know.
Deebo Samuel, I was touting him. He smashed, and then I said, well, it's time to move off. And I'm doing it with Nico Collins now. I was touting him, had a huge year, and now I'm trying to pivot off of him. Kyron Williams is a guy right now who had a great fish in. Andy Coop, if you're in the chat, I'm sorry, but I'm trying to trade my Kyron Williams shares right now. If I could flip Kyron Williams for Travis Etienne, Kenneth Walker, guys that I believe to be safer, better long-term assets, I'm doing that in a heartbeat.
Got to, dude. And you have to be real careful because we've seen it time and time again. Like sometimes it's not the player, but the situation. I mean, Philip Lindsay, Tyler Algier, Dameon Pierce. My goodness, with Dameon Pierce, like you got to be very careful with that stuff. So yeah, that's where we're at. I had a question for you, but it's the next question I had for you. I don't know if it's really even going to be super applicable because you're not doing it right now, but maybe coming up. What's your favorite piece of like dynasty related or off-season content that you do? So I know you're kind of right now doing a little award season tour, right? You kind of just hanging out, doing a little radio, doing a little quick out. But when it does get back to the nitty gritty content, what's something that you really like doing in the offseason?
So I basically spent an entire month fine-tuning my dynasty rankings right after the Super Bowl
Yeah.
ends, so along with my rookie stuff. And every single week, I kind of focus on a different position, and then I write an article where I lump together all of my tiers, and then I rank inside those tiers. So I start off with wide receivers, then I do running backs, then I do quarterbacks, then I do tight ends, and I put these guys in similar buckets. And it's a great exercise for me because I'm a strong believer in trying to trade back inside tiers and acquire more assets. So I will lump all these guys together. You've got, and I haven't done it yet, so I'm just completely spitballing here. But you talk about like your creme de la creme, the best of the best wide receivers, your Justin Jefferson, your CeeDee Lamb, your Jamar Chase, your Amon-Ra St. Brown. So I put those guys in one bucket, rank them inside there, kind of explain what you should be looking for trade value wise for each of these guys. But then I'm also a strong believer in trying to trade back. So like last year, I was recommending if you've got Jamar Chase, I don't see a huge gap between Jamar Chase and CeeDee Lamb. So if you can flip your Jamar Chase for CeeDee Lamb and get a second round pick on top of it, that's money right there because you're acquiring more assets and you're not making a huge difference. And now, of course, Joe Burrow got hurt and Jamar Chase got hurt, but CeeDee Lamb smashed this year. So anybody that was able to trade back from Jamar Chase and get a CeeDee Lamb with picks on top of that is feeling pretty good about that. So that's a process that, like I said, takes me about a full month where I go through each position 1 week at a time. But that's my favorite thing that I do in the off season. Now, once training camps start, then we get a little bit more into that's when the redraft switch kind of flips, and I have a lot of fun then. Then I do these deep dives, these individual player spotlights where I'll spend 2 or 3 days just diving deep on one player, write 1,500 to 2,000 words on a single player, range of outcomes, all that. That's fun, but that's still way, way, way
Right
down the
on.
road.
Yeah. That's the part of this game, again, very difficult things to do. And that's why you got to look to somebody like yourself for those type things. And again, you have to block out the noise of the people out there that are trying to they're trying to stay too attached to their process and certain things and their notions that, like, okay, I can truly differentiate between these guys and these guys within this tier, or I can,
Mhm.
truly create something through the draft for you. If you can create extra values and give yourself extra chances, then that's the way to rock and roll, right? Like, we know to a certain degree that it's going to be random, right? Like, N'Keal Harry can be the most can't miss guy, and he can miss, right?
Mhm.
Corey Davis was, no one out there was saying Corey Davis is not good. Find me the person that was saying that. Nobody was saying that. So, like, you have to try and give yourself as many chances as possible. And sometimes, there's not a big difference from one guy to the next. So it is
And it
important
is
to give yourself
those
lots of
really
shots.
the really polarizing guys are the guys that we spend so much time discussing because you know what? We already talked about Nico Collins, a guy, year 3 breakout, had been a 7-point per game producer for his first 2 seasons, and now all of a sudden is putting us, giving us elite wide receiver 1 production. That's a guy that's going to be really polarizing because we don't know what to make of a situation
Right.
like that because he's not following normal trends. Puka Nacua, a 5th-round rookie who is just smashing records his rookie season, but he's also tied to a guy like Matthew Stafford, who we've seen turn Kenny Galladay into a stud, and we saw turn Golden Tate into a stud, and we saw him make Cooper Kupp the most valuable wide receiver in fantasy history. These are the guys that I think you really need to have some sort of take on. Like, are you buying into it? Is
Right.
Puka Nacua a top 5 dynasty wide receiver, or is he a guy you're trying to get out from underneath on? Is Nico Collins a top 10 guy, or is he somebody you're trying to trade back and flip into a safer asset? And those polarizing players are the guys that can really make or break your season going into next year.
Right. And that's the thing, especially with these guys that are outliers, because it's so easy to just pull out the guys that hit and say, oh, yeah, of course he can, Puka Nacua can be good because Stephon Diggs was good and he was a 5th-round pick and Tyreek Hill was good and Amon-Ra St. Brown as a 4th-round pick was good. But when
You
you
and I were both
really,
you and I were both wrong on Amon-Ra. I'm not trying
I
to put you on
know.
blast. I'm taking accountability myself. I was
Well,
wrong on Amon-Ra. After his rookie
right.
season, I said, "This is
Yeah.
unsustainable. He can't keep doing this," and he keeps doing it.
He keeps
And
doing
I
it. Well,
sold Amon-Ra St. Brown shares after his rookie season and egg all over my face for it.
Well, the thing is, though, when you do the math on it, like, you go back and look at the articles that say, like, okay, here are the guys I'm selling. And Amon-Ra St. Brown is in there. People kill you for that. But
Mhm.
in articles like that, like, I was writing articles like that, and in those articles was Darnell Mooney and Gabriel Davis and Jacoby Myers. And if you sold all of them, there's a chance that, okay, you lost one guy that turned out really good, but you could have gotten back so much more. I mean, like guys like Chris Godwin were going like the third round of rookie drafts, all Terry McLaurin, like you could have all these better, you know what I mean? Like it, and if you, when you really break it down, there's so many more guys that end up being Quincy and Nunwa than end up being Puka Nacua. You know what I mean? Like they both have cool names, but it doesn't always work out like that. So you have to, when you really boil it down, it's like a 5% hit rate. So the fact that you did hit, now you have a decision to make, but that doesn't mean that now you're the wide receiver whisperer that can just next year also invent the next guy. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
because there probably isn't a next guy.
Yeah.
There's not going to be a 5th round rookie who breaks records next year.
Exactly. It's like the worst thing that can happen for that type. It's like going to the casino and hitting big and thinking that now that's going to happen every time. Right. Or hitting on a scratch ticket. Like you hit on the scratch ticket, you cash it out and you don't play again. That's that. If you can do that, then I have no problem with you hanging on to Puka Nacua. Go right ahead. Right. But if you're just going to be that person that continues to gamble like that, the house is going to win. So,
and I think that's one of those prime situations where you can trade back within a tier. Like if you can flip your Puka Nacua for a Jamar Chase, a CeeDee Lamb, or Justin Jefferson, even if you need to add a 2nd or 3rd round pick on top of it, you do that in a heartbeat. And if you can trade back to the next tier and still get, if you can get Brandon Ayuk and a late 1st round pick for Puka Nacua, you got to do it. Even if Puka Nacua is the next coming of whoever and is going to be a perennial wide receiver one, the process tells us that it probably isn't sustainable, and more likely than not, you're not going to regret trading back.
Right. Bingo. I mean, the reality is like it's a conservative play, especially if you can get a guy like Jamar Chase when he's 23 years old, right? Yeah. Jamar Chase is younger than Tank Dell, right?
And I already see Jamar Chase is in the top 5 wide receiver takes. Get out of here. Get out of here.
Send them to me. Tag me in every one of those. I would love that. I love that.
I will
stuff.
do.
So, okay, let me ask you before we get in the next segment here and debate some players, but I want to ask, what's your favorite format for Dynasty? Because we can, like, here, this is the problem I run into, especially on like Reddit and on Twitter all the time. Everybody in their mind is thinking about their league and their format, right? So somebody comments and says something, they're thinking about their super flex full PPR league, tight end premium, blah, blah, blah. Whereas somebody else might comment and they're thinking about a normal 1 QB league. So like for you, what's kind of what's your favorite format, or like what format does your brain live in?
So I'm kind of a sicko, to be honest. I know a lot of people like being in like all the same leagues. I'm only going to play in leagues that are 12 teams, super flex, tight end premium. I only like joining leagues if it's a format that I'm not already in. And
dude, I do the same thing. I do the same thing. Like I need a guillotine.
Exactly. Oh, they're fun.
You're in? I need one. That's the format I've been missing. I need one of those. Yeah.
They're a blast. Yeah. Paul Charchi and his good friend of Footballguys. We'll get you in a guillotine.
Okay, good.
They're fun. But that's what I'm saying. I'm a sicko. Like if somebody says like, hey, I've got this 16 team 2 tight end league, like I've never played in one of those before. Let's do it. Let's ride. Let's have some fun with this. So I think for me, if you ask what my favorite format is, it's just the deeper, the better. I like playing in deep leagues. I feel like the deeper the league is, the less of a factor luck is. And I'm not even talking like 30 team leagues here. I'm talking deep rosters. Like I want to be staring at my wide receiver 5 spot and saying, do I start, Noah Brown or Nelson Aguilar this weekend? Like that's the type of fantasy league that I want to be playing in. I want to be torn between, Deonta Foreman and Justice Hill. Like that's what I like, are just these deep sicko leagues where those wide receiver 5s and the running back 4s and the 4th flex options, those are the guys that you're tilting over every week.
Yes, dude. The leagues that force you to start those guys is what I love. I love an excuse to get them in there, right? Because, there's too many leagues where you're right, where it's like my bench is loaded and, I don't like having to go out and like try and do 2-for-1s and do all that. I like just being able to start all my boys, And again, it gives you an advantage. That's why I swear I have, when people go out and try and cut the benches short and say they want waivers to be more active, that doesn't help the sharp gamer. That doesn't help the person that's got their ear to the streets. That helps the casual gamer. So if you're a Fantasy Alarm member or a Footballguys member, you want to add bench spots. My dog Luffy, you can hear in the background, she's all about it. She's like, add them up. Yeah, fire them up. So let's just assume then deep league with full PPR, just normal type league like that, or half PPR. What do you want? What do you like?
I like full PPR.
Okay.
I don't have a strong take one way or the other, but full PPR. I like more points. It's fun looking at a 270 point lineup. I like more points. So give me PPR. You know what I really like though? What I started doing this year, I got in a couple half PPR and then half point per first down as well. And that's something that I feel like a lot of people aren't playing. And we have that in the league that we do, our Twitter league. It's half
Yes.
first down, half point per reception. And I really like that because I feel like it is a perfect balance to kind of make running backs and wide receivers equally valuable.
Yeah, well, first, I mean, when you boil down what football is, it's so funny. We do all this for fantasy football, like we're all these stats all over the place, and then you watch the game, and there's only two things that matter, right? First
First
downs
downs.
and touchdowns.
Yeah. Right.
And and I guess technically hoping the field goal goes through if you have to go. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
first downs, touchdowns. That's the game, baby. So I do love that. I also actually, while we're talking format, I do like leagues. I found myself really liking the leagues where fourth down stops are points for defense
Ooh.
because
It should be.
you
It's turnover.
it's great. Yeah. And it's so exciting. And the players get so fired up, right? So when you're actually watching your defense and you're like, oh, this is my defense here. And you're like, oh, wow, I can score 3 points for, I like doing like 3 points for it because you're like, damn, I can get 3 points here. That's a lot of points. And
Mhm.
then, they make the stop and everyone's like, whoa, let's go. You know what I
And
mean?
how
Like,
is that? How is a fourth down stop any different than an interception or a
yeah,
fumble? You're forcing the offense to turn the ball over. They aren't getting any points, and you're getting good field position. Like that's a huge
it's
swing
a
in real
hype.
life.
It's a hype,
I
hype
like that.
moment, man. It's a hype moment. So yeah. But anyway, let's get into some debates here. And I'm going to start with one. I'm going to go one debate: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. And we might as well. I have a player that you've already talked about on here. So let's go right to it. These guys very close, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot here. I know you're trying to take it easy, but if you were in Dynasty right now and you had to pick between these two players, full PPR, who would you rather have, Nico Collins or Tank Dell?
You're giving me some tough ones here.
That's
I
and
looked
their
at the guys we were
teammates
going to talk
too.
about.
Their
Their teammates.
teammates too, which is tough. That makes it even tougher, right?
And now I know I'm supposed to have a strong take here because that's what fantasy football is all about. Coop, I completely copped out. These guys are my wide receiver 20 and wide receiver 21 back to back in my dynasty
Let's
rankings.
go.
So I
Who's 20?
prefer
Who's 20?
Collins.
Okay.
Collins. And I prefer Nico Collins. I do. But the thing is, I have him at wide receiver 20, which is way below consensus. Like,
It is.
I've seen mock drafts where he's going top 10. I just had, Alfredo Brown and we did a show about dynasty risers. He talked about Nico Collins and he said Nico Collins is inside my top 12. And like, I'm the Nico Collins guy. Like, I have been touting this guy for years. Like, since he came into the league, I was saying go out and get Nico Collins, but I just can't get behind this top 10, top 12 label that people are giving him now. So I do prefer Nico Collins to Tank Dell, but that could easily flip. And what really jumps out to me, weeks 9 through 12, that's when we saw Tank Dell like really emerge before
Star.
his injury. And we were just like, this guy is good. We know it takes rookies some time to warm up. So I've seen a lot of people look at, well, this is what Tank Dell did this year, and this is what Nico Collins did this year. I don't think that's really a fair assessment because it was Tank Dell's rookie season and year 3 for Nico Collins. Yeah,
Right.
Nico Collins should have had a better start to the season, but weeks 9 to 12 before the injury, Tank Dell became a full-time player. And during those weeks, Nico Collins was still productive. Like he scored a touchdown almost every single week, but the team was averaging almost 30 points per game. But if you look over that 4-week stretch before the injury, Tank Dell had more targets, higher target share, had more receptions, had more yards per game, scored more touchdowns. And then there's this new metric that Fantasy Points came out with. I don't know if you've seen this, the first read data. Like who
Yeah, I
was the
have.
first read?
That's actually great because the coaches talk about that all the time. I
Yeah.
just really interject. I saw somebody asked Sean McDermott about why Dalton Kincaid wasn't more involved, and he
Mhm.
straight up said, "Well, he was the first read on a lot of plays, but they just didn't pan out the way they were supposed to." Like if the coaches are talking like that, then we should be looking at that.
And during that week 9 to 12 stretch, Tank Dell was the first read almost twice as often as Nico
Right.
Collins. So that was when we saw this switch where they basically made Tank Dell the wide receiver 1 in Houston. So that's what concerns me a little bit because then Tank Dell got hurt and then Nico Collins went on a tear. Nico Collins had a huge playoff game. And I think people are saying Nico Collins is the wide receiver 1 there. But we saw at the halfway point of the season, Tank Dell kind of took over. So that's why I don't dislike Nico Collins. I think that CJ Stroud and this offense is good enough that they can support 2 wide receivers here, but I really don't have a strong take between the two. I think Nico Collins is great. I think Tank Dell is great, but I think that, by the midway point of next season, we could easily see Tank Dell jump ahead of Collins.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And honestly, sometimes with these like new offenses and QB changes and stuff, I worry sometimes when everybody is blowing up that maybe it's just that the quarterback is really good. right? Like,
Yeah.
so you look at it and I'm like, okay, well, yeah, these guys are blowing up. I watched Noah Brown, a guy who's done
Yeah.
not
Back-to-back 150-yard
yeah,
games.
like 300 games. And I see, the other team that concerns me too is the Packers, where I look at it and
Mhm.
I'm like, did the Packers actually hit on 7 wide receivers, or is Jordan Love just good? So you have to ask yourself those questions, because there are guys that can survive with doesn't matter, right? Like Andre Johnson, of course, is the gold standard for who cares who's throwing it. He's just a good
Right.
player. Terry McLaurin, I guess you could throw in
Yep.
that group, right? So, like, I don't know. In Dynasty, I have a hard time saying this guy is super elite no matter what in Dynasty for the next 8 years, just like yourself. And it is hard to get over those labels. The wide receiver 1 label that comes with top 12, the the top 10 wide receiver label. So
And it's
I'm
crazy.
I'm
Right
with
now
you,
I'm
man.
seeing Nico Collins, who we can't forget. Yeah, he was a wide receiver 1 last year. I'm not taking away from what he did. 18 points per game. That's unbelievable. But for the 2 years before that, he was averaging 7 points per game. And yeah, he didn't have a good quarterback, but guess what? He's only got 1 year left on his contract with Houston. What happens if he hits free agency and he doesn't have a good quarterback again? Then all of a sudden we're looking at him as a wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 in a new offense. And the fact that we have guys like Devontae Smith and Brandon Ayuk and DJ Moore, who have shown us rock solid profiles, regardless of what offense they're on, regardless of who the quarterback is, for extended years, that after one good season, we're throwing Nico Collins ahead of all those guys. I love Nico
De-
Collins, but I can't get behind it.
Devonta Smith won the Heisman, and we just forgot about it. I'll
Devonta
tell
Smith
you.
gave us top 12 wide receiver production on a team with AJ Brown. Like,
Yeah,
with or without AJ Brown, he's been elite.
you want me to make that take you just had even scarier?
Let's hear it.
My comp for Nico Collins coming out of college, it was Kenny Galladay.
Oh,
Which which Kenny Galladay did have a 1,000-yard, 10 touchdown
uh-huh.
season, but then he went to play with a bad quarterback. So literally what you said, like both these guys, Nico Collins, Kenny Galladay, and again, it's like Kenny Galladay is a good player. 3rd round pick. They ran literally the same exact 40
Mhm.
time. They're the same
Both
height.
big.
They're the same way.
Yep.
Yeah, they were picked like literally
Oh,
four
God.
picks apart. Yeah. So
Yeah.
let's move on. I don't really want to think about that because I have a ton of Nico Collins myself. So
Same.
let's go. Let's go
We'll
over
go trade it for
to.
Brandon Ayuk. That's what you should be doing with Nico Collins.
Well, if you can do that, then you do that.
Yeah.
Let's go over to tight end, because you and I have actually talked about this in the past. So I want to get your thoughts on 2 guys. We're way up at the top here. 2 guys we both like. Sam LaPorta and Trey McBride. And this one I'll allow you to cop out because I have a cop out answer. But what are your thoughts if you had to rank them full, let's say full PPR right now, if you had to rank these guys, so who are you going to put ahead?
I got Trey McBride as my tight end 1. I do. And I've got a tier at the top, and it is 3 young guys. And I don't know if you'll push back on this too much. Coop, I always defer to you for tight end discussion because this is what you do. You're great at it. But I've got Trey McBride, Sam LaPorta, Dalton Kincaid. That's my 1,
Those
2,
are my
and 3
boys.
all in the same tier. And right now, I think people prefer Sam LaPorta. And this is one of those situations. If I can trade Sam LaPorta and get Trey McBride plus a 2nd round pick, plus even a 3rd round pick, whatever it is, if I can trade back and flip my LaPorta shares into McBride shares with a cherry on top, I'm running to the bank with that.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of context missing with Trey McBride's career as a whole so far. And I think that's what a lot of people are going to say is, well, Sam LaPorta did this as a rookie and Trey McBride did it in year 2. I am willing, and I don't do this often, I'm willing to just throw McBride's rookie season away. The Kingsbury offense was terrible. He was playing behind Zach Ertz. Kyler Murray got injured. I don't think we really got a chance to see what McBride was capable of. He was blocking on over 50% of his snaps his rookie season. And then we saw it this year. He started to develop into a pass catcher. He started taking over for Zach Ertz's role before the injury. It was after the injury that he really exploded. And if you look, man, from week 8 onward, when he became a full-time player, top 3 in targets, top 3 in receptions, top 3 in yards, top 5 in routes run, top 5 in targets per routes run, top 5 in yards per route run. I mean, he was just smashing across the board. Yeah, LaPorta caught touchdowns and LaPorta had more fantasy points. But if you look at the underlying metrics, I think Trey McBride is just the better player. And then on top of that, he's tied to Kyler Murray for the foreseeable future. And we know Kyler Murray loves tight ends. So I'm going with McBride over LaPorta here.
Yeah. And in full PPR, I feel the same way. Then that's the cop out, is that the argument for LaPorta is that in half PPR or standard, touchdowns and kind of the play style. He is more of like, honestly, he plays a lot more in line. People are surprised to find that he blocks on like 10% of his pass plays a lot of in line. He's kind of going like the George Kittle Gronk route to some degree, even though he's not really that level of blocker at this stage. But that's kind of how they're using him. Where in full PPR, I want guys that are playing wide receiver. I want Trey McBride. I want Dalton Kincaid. I actually got some Dalton Kincaid cards coming in the mail. I just now got into I do this every year. I do like football, like fantasy ends, and I get into dry January, and I'm like, let me get into a ridiculous hobby and just take it way over the top. This year, it's cards for me right now. Yeah, right. It's football cards. So, but I'm sure I'll be done with it. Like I've done shoes, watches, whatever it's going to be. But that's what it is right now. But I got some Kincaids coming. But I'll tell you, the McBride, like where he's set up right now. The other thing for Dynasty you have to keep in mind is that what are the odds that he gets pushed out of being a top 2 target on the team, right? Because there's very few guys that become the focal point. Yeah, 0, right? So there's very few guys.
Harrison Jr. and he's still going to get 100 plus targets next year.
Exactly, he's still there. Marquise Brown's probably gone, right? And you look at it, and with Sam LaPorta, all these talks about them bringing a split end because they have a great slot flanker in Amon-Ra St. Brown. Split end, they're using Josh Reynolds. And then they have the field stretcher in Jameson Williams. What happens if they do bring in a Mike Evans or T. Higgins? Now it's a nightmare, right? But if you throw T. Higgins,
if they lose Ben Johnson? I think that's the other thing people don't want to talk about is, I mean, the offense has been good, don't get me wrong, but a lot of that could be attributed to Ben Johnson.
They're losing Ben Johnson.
That he does. Exactly.
They're losing Ben Johnson. There's not enough Ford money out in the world for him to not want to be a head coach. Right. Like he's going somewhere else. So yeah, I mean, it's very close. And I think the real takeaway here is if you can trade one for the other and get a little something extra, you do it. Like, honestly, both ways. Like, if I had Trey McBride and somebody offered me Sam LaPorta and a second, I might just do that. You know what I mean? And just it's close enough. I'll take them both. But if you can get in full PPR, go the other way, then that's the way I'm going.
And don't do what I'm not saying here. Sam LaPorta is freaking awesome. All right. I'm not saying
exactly
Sam LaPorta isn't great. I'm not saying sell Sam LaPorta for whatever you can. I'm just saying if you can get a Trey McBride or a Dalton Kincaid with some extra on top, I think you're staying in a pretty similar tier, similar to trading back from Jamar Chase last year for a CD Brown. I think that, or a CD Lamb. I just think it's a smart process to try to get a similar value of player and get additional assets on top of that.
These guys are good. They're going to be good for a long time. I feel the same way about Kincaid. I feel the same way about Kyle Pitts, but that's another take for another day. Joey Wright in the chat wants to know when we're doing poll perception. I am retired from poll perception. I actually won last time I was on Front Yard Fantasy. So take that, Joey. And Joey, by the way, I need to know when I listened to your episode the other day. I need to know when your Oscar picks are coming out because that's what I root for every year, whoever Joey roots for, because he's the movie master in my realm.
I say the Iron Claw not getting a single nomination is a travesty.
I got to watch that.
Believe it.
That's the one with what's his name, the handsome guy there,
Zac Efron,
all those guys, Zac Efron
and Jeremy Allen White. Yeah, the two very handsome guys. But dude, it is
just like this show.
I didn't know what I was. Exactly. Look at us. I didn't expect to walk out. I mean, like the movie ended and everybody stayed in their seats for like 3 minutes and you just hear sniffling throughout the entire theater. It is one of the saddest movies I've ever seen. So go like late at night if you're embarrassed about like going around with like red puffy eyes. It's a rough one.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Maybe I'll watch that one at home. I watched that one at home. Yeah. It's one of those ones where afterwards you're like, I'm not crying. I just have something in both my eyes.
No, I'm not kidding. I went to the bathroom really in the movie theater after, and it's just like 5 guys like all wiping their eyes in the mirror.
Got their hand on the mirror. They're like,
rough, man.
Yeah. All right. We're not going to be able to get to the mock draft, I don't think, today. Let's finish up on a couple of these ones. Maybe we can jump in and look at it. We'll see. We got to be out before 2:00 because we have the Better Sports Betting Show coming up. Dan Servadidio serving up some awesome picks. So make sure you stay tuned after this on the Fantasy Alarm channel. But let's hit a couple more. I want to add, this one is very difficult for me. You and I didn't talk about this one in advance, but I'm just having a hard time with it because I've had a couple questions on it. It's a hard stance, man. Quarterback, Joe Burrow or Justin Herbert, right? And the thing with them is that you don't really get much more mobility out of one than the other. I know Herbert is capable of it. They're both capable of it and don't really do it much. So like, I don't know, man. Like, where are you at with these two guys, dude?
I got nothing for you.
Throw them in a tier, right? Just throw them in a tier and whatever is whatever. And again, we make so much of this whole thing where it's like you have to have a stance and you have to have a take and you have to have a trade, but I don't know, man. Give me something.
QB6A, QB6B. I got nothing for you. I
That's
wish I
where I'm
did.
at too. That's
We
where I'm
talked
at
about it
too.
Monday morning on our show. Alfredo and I, we talked about our QB tiers, and that's exactly what we said. We both Alfredo and I were in lockstep on QB1 through QB7. And when we got to Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert, we said, well, who do you prefer? And both of us just kind of shrugged and said,
Right.
they're both really good. There's like no differentiating factor between the two. I
Right.
can't give you anything.
Not age, right? Like, and Burrow might lose T. Higgins, but Keenan Allen's getting up there, right? Mike Williams is going to miss games no matter what, right? Like, so it's almost just like it is. My policy is this: if I have them, I'm happy to have them. I'm not looking
Yeah.
to move them. I'm just going to sit there and hang tight, man.
It's just
So
one of those like the other. Like if somebody out there really loves Justin Herbert and you can flip Joe Burrow for Justin Herbert plus or vice versa, do it. But I don't think you're getting that. I think everybody kind of looks at these two as just the, there's such similar players.
yeah.
It's really hard. And maybe Justin Herbert gets some steam when they sign Jim Harbaugh, and then maybe you can. I don't know, but I really just don't have a strong stance here.
Yeah. I mean, you know what? Better boss in the chat, Matt Deutsch producing the show today. Honestly, I'm with you. That's fine. You know what I mean? Like they are tied together. They're best friends or whatever. So that's, what, if you, whatever you need to split those hairs and split them. But yeah, I'm with you. All right. Last one here. These are, we've been kind of operating near the top of the rankings here to some degree. So I'm going to go a little deeper at running back. Two guys have been gaining a lot of steam in the dynasty world. On one hand, you got Jaylen Warren, who is our generation's Tony Pollard, right? Like I'm glad that Sanderson's going to come on the show late in February, but I'm glad that Sanderson and Marcus Mosher, they got a new Tony Pollard here that to demand that he gets more carries. So that's Jaylen Warren. And then on the other side, Zamir White is, shout out John and Pemba, who we got to bring up one of his guys. He's been a big Zamir White guy, just kind of waiting for the moment where Jacobs goes away. So if you were going to pick one of these guys, who would you rather have stashed away?
Zamir White for me. I love Zamir White. The two guys that I was like screaming from the mountaintops last offseason were Zamir White and Ty Chandler. Yeah. And for the first 3 months of the season, I was like, oh God, what did I do recommending these guys? And then we finally saw like a little taste of it at the end of the season. I just think they're such good football players. Zamir White, he's got everything I want to see in an NFL running back. He ran a 4.4 flat at 6 foot 215. Like that is just elite speed, elite size. Like
he's the opposite of Kyron Williams. Kyron Williams is like small, slow, and Zamir White, big, fast. I know. Sorry, Nico, but that's the way it goes, dude.
But I love Zamir White.
Being behind Josh Jacobs, it's not his fault.
He was buried. And I thought, like, I was trying to buy Zamir White 2 years ago because Josh McDaniels always runs a running back by committee. I said, we're going to see a lot of Zamir White. And then Josh McDaniels just bucked his trend and just turned Josh Jacobs into a workhorse. Then we saw it with Antonio Pierce. I don't know if you saw, I tweeted this out this morning, Coop. I was looking into Zamir White because I really like him. 5th in the league in yards after contact per attempt. We're looking at Devon Achane. Took the league by storm. Jonathan Taylor, perennial stud. Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery behind, one of the best offensive lines in the league. They get to hit defenders with a whole head of steam. And then Zamir White, 5th in the league in yards after contact per attempt.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, when you dig, I did see your tweet, and when you dig deeper into those numbers, some of these guys that lead in those stats, they're not necessarily even the best at it. Whereas Zamir White is, when you watch him run, he's generating the extra yards. Sometimes that stat is misleading when you have Devon Achane and somebody gets a hand on
arm on him in the backfield. Exactly. Then he goes for 75.
There were years where Raheem Mostert with the 49ers, you'd look at his yards after contact and they would be massive. The 1 year he was like the yards per contact per rush for him was like 30 yards because he played 3 games. He had a 70-yard touchdown against the Jets and a 70-yard receiving touchdown against the Cardinals where he got touched at the line.
Yep.
And you looked at the yards per contact, it was like, this isn't any guy that's breaking tackles, right? You know what I mean?
Zamir White, his 2.3 yards after contact per attempt come from him pushing a defender like a cannonball 2.3 yards every single time he touches the ball. Yeah.
Right. So that's not to say that Jaylen Warren isn't a good player, but I mean, the reality is that Najee Harris is still under contract next year. And I'll tell you what, it's not crazy. When you look at the league not wanting to pay running backs, it's not crazy. And people are going to be – just imagine the Twitter sphere if they pick up the 5th-year option on Najee Harris. I mean, it's not crazy. We say it's not going to happen, but you know what happens? sometimes they say, "Hey, we like this player. We don't want to give him multiple years. Let's just keep him for a year." So
Yep.
I mean,
And then they're
we'll
gonna
find out.
franchise him the year after.
Dude, and then he won't be a free agent for the first time till he's 28 if they did
Yep.
that, dude. That would be
Yep.
wild. But anyway, you know what? We got to jump out of here because Matt Deutsch, our producer, is going to be jumping over to do the Better Sports Show after this. So everyone stay tuned. Kluge, thank you so much for coming on, man. You're the best, dude. I'm sure we'll link up again this offseason. Let everybody know where they can find you on Twitter, what you got going on coming up soon. I know you're on your yacht tour. You're only doing radio shows and you only pop in to talk a little ball, but coming up soon, you're going to be back on the grind. So let everybody know what you got going on.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Dave Kluge. We're doing the Footballguys Fantasy Football Show with myself and Alfredo Brown. You can find that at youtube.com/footballguys. We're only doing one episode a week right now, but you can catch that on Monday afternoons and then start to ramp up. We're getting into some draft discussion and rookie talks here in the next few weeks. And then, we always talk about how like it's the off season, we're chilling, we're relaxing, but before we know it, training camps are here, rookie camps are here. We're going to be talking free agency. I'm especially excited about this year's free agency class. I mean, you
Yes.
just look around; it is wild how many big name free agents, especially at the running back position, are out there. That's what I'm looking forward to is talking free agency in a couple of weeks. But yeah, going to be a fun off season.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for coming on. Everybody in the chat, thanks for hanging out. Matt Deutsch behind the glass, thank you. And that'll do it for us. We'll be back next Wednesday with more Dynasty talk here on Quick Outs Fantasy Football. Let's go.